Kōloa as on a mill basis in 1835. And so that first effort led the community to want to have more in-depth oral histories. And so they asked Warren Nishimoto and Michiko Kodama to assist them and work with them collectively to conduct oral histories. And 33 more interviews were conducted in depth. And that's what you can find on Scholar Space, which you can see, and our chat has the link to it. And the interviewers were Evelyn Hodges and Chris Planas. So this evening, we're going to share 5 excerpts from 5 of those oral histories. And Lurleen McGregor, who is a filmmaker and also an author, will be sharing those excerpts that she has woven together for this evening. And then we have panelists here in the library and one online who will share reflections on those oral histories. So we have Ada Kuna, who's the author of the Kōloa Plantation Days, which is currently in press and will be released at the end of 2021. And she will be sharing her a little bit about the book. We have Mamo Kaneshiro, who's 95 years old, and he is the owner of Kaneshiro Farms, which just closed last year after 100 years and was honored through a virtual Kōloa Plantation Days celebration. He also Little League Baseball for 30 years, and he was telling us about his involvement with the Farm Bureau for about 50 years. And his grandnephew, Arrow Kaneshiro, is a member of the Kauai County Council, and Councilman Arrow Kaneshiro will join us online. And he's also the president of the Kōloa Plantation Days. And his father, Darrell Kaneshiro, before him was also on the Kauai County Council. We also have Bobby Waterhouse McCord, and her great-great-grandfather, Dr. Smith, was the only doctor for 40 years on Kauai. And her grandfather was Dr. A.H. Waterhouse, and she'll be sharing memories about Dr. Brennecke as well as Iki Moir. And Delia Jacinto Akaji is the administrator for the Kauai Historical Society, and her father is the unofficial mayor of Kōloa in his lifetime. And Bertram Almeida, who is the vice president of the Kōloa Plantation Days, and Lenora Kaia Okamalie, who is born and raised in Kōloa and is a community planner and GIS analyst with Kauai County Planning Department. And finally, and one of the persons who helped coordinate this together with Ada, Melissa McFarren Warwick, who is the coordinator for the Kōloa Plantation Days celebration. So we will be calling upon them as we go throughout the program to discuss and share reflections and memories as well. Mahalo. I now want to turn this over to Lurleen McGregor, who put our podcast together and will be sharing the oral history excerpts with us.
Aloha. So to give you a little more background about Kōloa, Kōloa is the site of Hawaii's first commercial sugar plantation. It opened in 1835 after 3 Bostonians leased a 980-acre tract of land from Kamehameha III on the east side of Waihonu Stream and planted 25 acres of sugarcane. They constructed a mill dam to power their sugar mill. At that time, in 1835, Kōloa was already the 3rd largest whaling port in the kingdom after Lahaina and Honolulu, and was Kauai's major entry and departure point for foreign goods coming in and agricultural products leaving. The plantation struggled financially, but managed to stay in business for the next 40 years until the Reciprocity Treaty passed the US Congress in 1875, which then allowed Hawaii-grown sugar to enter the US markets duty-free. So not only did Kōloa Plantation start turning around and having huge profits and increasing their land holdings, the number of sugar plantations throughout the islands more than doubled, and land cultivated in sugarcane rose from 12,000 acres to 214,000 acres. To keep up with the demand for labor, from 1878, after the Sugar Act passed, the Reciprocity Act passed, to the turn of the century, 40,000 immigrants from Portugal, Japan, Norway, Germany, Korea, Puerto Rico, and elsewhere arrived to supplement the Hawaiian and Chinese laborers in the island's plantations. In Kōloa, this spurred the growth of a community with the development of workers' housing, schools, churches, a hospital, stores, trade businesses, and recreational facilities. In 1948, Kōloa Plantation, which was plagued once again by financial difficulties, was sold to another longtime Kauai sugar plantation, the Grove Farm Company, which acquired all of Kōloa's plantation's assets, including 3,500 acres of cane land and the Kōloa Mill. So all the interviews that you're going to hear, all 5 of these were conducted in 1987. And we begin with Eric Iki Moir. He was born in 1931 in Waimea, Kauai, the only child of Hector and Alexandria Knudsen Moir. His father was the manager of the Kōloa Sugar Company from 1933 until 1948, when it merged with Grove Farm. His mother was a descendant of the Sinclair, Gay, and Robinson families who owned Ni'ihawa and parts of Kauai. Iki Moir was called one of Kauai's premier lecturers on Hawaiian history, particularly on the Kōloa region. He was active in the Poipu community where he lived, serving on the board of Kauai Historical Society and other community organizations, including conducting tours of the Grove Farm Homestead Museum. Moir passed away in 1996.
Kōloa has a very heavy missionary influence, but prior to the missionaries coming, is there any historical evidence of what was here in Kōloa?
When the ocean was too rough to go fishing, Napali or North Shore, Lihui side, it was nice down here. And there was ample water here. And lots of Hawaiians lived here. This is why they had the big whaling port, because again, there's a nice anchorage. When it was too rough in the early days to go to Honolulu from Lihui side, people left from Kōloa. You caught the boat to Honolulu from Kōloa landing. And that's probably why the white man first ended up here. They put the mission station where there were lots of people to convert. You know, in the early days, Kōloa had enough international traffic that the kingdom had a customs agent at Kōloa. Went down and collected the taxes for the materials brought in. The goods, whatever it is, foreign imports. Not all of it was taxed. In fact, in my Scottish letters, everybody is telling my grandmother in Scotland, when you buy material, make something out of it. Make a skirt, or make a big nightshirt, or something like that, because customs didn't charge you for clothing, but they charge you for material. So you're phoning up a skirt, right? You take some pleats in this big piece of material, you baste it, you put it together, you make a little buttonhole or something, and you say, hey, this is a skirt. And then when you get it here, you pull all the thread back out, and you make something you want out of it. And so basically they were doing this to avoid paying duty on this stuff, because there was no duty on clothing, but there was duty on yardage. In Kōloa, there's 2 things. First of all, Kōloa is no longer a plantation as such, as it was Kōloa Plantation up until 1948, right, January 1st, when Grove Farm took it over, has a beginning and has an end. And of course, secondly, what is the oldest sugar plantation. So this is where it all began. So that makes it historically significant. Though the first sugar plantation started here, a lot of the lands of Kōloa are not the greatest for sugar because they're so rocky. Terrible rock. Especially the Makai sections down here. The ones all down to Mahalapu. But even up top, my gosh, you know, some of these lands have been in sugar for I don't know how many years. And still, every time they plow them, they come up with rocks as big as, you know, a car or half a car that are still coming up. And this is after 100 years. So it's very, very hard on the equipment, very hard on the mill for all the rock that was going in. They had a tough time during the war for lack of personnel. And by the time the war was over, the railroad system was shot. Kōloa was, I think, up close to $1 million in debt. Kōloa needed a good infusion of money, and Earl Farm had it.
You want to go right on to the second one? Okay. So speaking about the rocky land there, our second interviewee is Catherine Katie Bukowski Viveiros. She was born in 1909 in Kōloa. Katie Viveiros was the 8th of 14 children born to Joseph and Sophia Bukowski, who were among a handful of immigrants who came to Hawaii from Poland in 1898 to work in the sugarcane fields. Joseph Bukowski held a variety of jobs throughout the years. Katie went as far as 7th grade before she went to work as a housekeeper for plantation managers. Later, she worked in the Kauai pineapple cannery and a cook at Kōloa Hospital, and then a nurse. She passed away in 2003.
Do you know why your parents came to Hawaii?
Well, they came to work in the plantations. The plantation hired them, you know, so many Germans and the Russians and the Polish. So my parents decided to come with them.
So when they came to Kauai, they went right to Kōloa.
Oh yes, they came and they stayed. They moved to Kalaheo. They were given lands in Kalaheo as a homestead. You go and work your land. And you live there. And then if you live there for 3 years, it belonged to you. That's how most of the people in Kalaheo got there. The Portuguese people came from Portugal, and they all got lands there, and they worked the land. That's why they became American citizens in order to get the land. See, that's where my parents came to be American citizens. But you see, they had such poor luck up there. My parents had a place on a slope hill. So they said every time around like the month of winter months, they would raise their cane, and here comes a storm, you know, would scoop up all their cane and ruined everything. So they took a big loss. So after that, they tried to raise pineapples to see if, you know, they had better luck. And it happened the same thing. So she said she was struggling, and with the children and all, they couldn't take it. So they decided that's how they came back to Kōloa.
Oh, so they gave up their homestead.
Oh yes, they did.
Oh, I see.
They just gave it up, and they came to Kōloa and worked in Kōloa, and they stayed.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay.
They took a contract. They had a contract, yeah. The plantation would give them so much acres of land that they had to raise their king. So you work your own king. And if you do good, well, of course the king goes to the mill, huh? But if you do good, well, you get the profit, and you pay so much, I guess, to the plantation, and you keep so much, whatever profit you make. That's the way it went, and that's how my dad started. My mother would go out and help my dad in the cane field. So they had a very hard life, but they sticked on to Kauai, you know, to Kōloa, and they didn't move from here. And we were all born here in Kōloa.
And where were you living at the time?
In the Kōloa camp. They had a camp there where they would call it the Portuguese camp. And of course they said Portuguese camp, but they were all mixtures. There were Germans, Polish, Russians, and there were Puerto Ricans, and a lot of Chinese, you know. But it seems like that there were more of the Portuguese, I think. Somehow, I don't know how they got the name, they just called it the Portuguese camp.
That was just a regular small plantation home.
Oh yes.
And how many of you children living there?
It was 11. We lived very happy together, you know.
So I want to ask Dahlia Kaji if you could unmute and also show us your video, and ask if you can, if those memories or what was shared struck memories about your experience, what you know about Kōloa plantation history.
Well, I believe that, and we're related to the Bukowskis through marriage. My grandmother's sister Joanna was married to a Bukowski, so I think we're related in some way, some small way. But my dad lived in the Portuguese camp as well. They arrived on Kauai in the late 1800s. Don't know a whole lot about my dad's side of the family, but it was a Jacinto Tevis family. And I know my dad had said that his uncle Tevis ran the Kōloa Theater and also lived on the property at some point. But it burned down when I was alive. It wasn't actually functioning as a theater. But I mean, I don't know how much more you want me to go on about my father's family.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. And I also wanted to ask Ada Kuna if she might want to share some thoughts about that, sparked by what was shared.
Well, I had heard about Iki Moir telling about the rocks in Kōloa. There's a reason for that. About 1.5 million years ago, where it was a series of eruptions in the Kōloa area, and it was called the Kōloa Volcanic Series. And it spread lava all over Kōloa and Lihue. And because of these rocks, the Hawaiians living in the area ran soil down the stream and covered the rocks, and then they were able to plant taro on them. And it was when the Latin Company came over to set up a mercantile company in Kōloa. They had one on Oahu. To set up the mercantile company, they noticed that the sugarcane was growing around those taro patches. And that's what gave them the idea to raise sugar.
Oh, wow, amazing. And I think Bobby McCord, if you could unmute also, you knew Iki Moir. Maybe you want to share something else about Iki that would be interesting to all of us to learn.
Well,
yeah.
Oh, well, gosh, about Iki Moir. I grew up with Iki Moir. And did you know that his mother and father were given a wedding present of their house? His mother, the Knutsons, Annie Knutson's mother and father built that house, which is now the Kōloa restaurant, which is now a restaurant. And that's Iki Moir. We just loved Iki Moir. His best friend was, oh my gosh. Well, anyway.
Okay, thank you so much. Lurleen, let's hear some other.
Oh gosh.
Mahalo, Bobby. You can mute now.
Okay, so continuing on. So at the turn of the century, as many of the Japanese left the plantation for jobs in Honolulu and other urban centers, the Filipinos began arriving in 1906, and they started coming in large numbers by the 1920s, which is our next viewee, Vicente Bargayo. He was born in 1901 in Karkar, Cebu, in the Philippines. He was an aspiring journalist, but had to drop out of high school in 1921 after the death of his mother. He became a teacher near his hometown and taught for 6 years before immigrating to Hawaii in 1929. He was very active in the Kōloa Debating Club, the Kōloa Filipino Community Club, and the Kōloa Federal Credit Union. He was also interviewed in 1987 in Kōloa, where he lived until his death in 1989.
Who did you talk to about coming to Hawaii?
Oh, the Sugar Plantation Association.
They come to your town and recruit?
Yeah, the agent, some agent. Then I apply, then I pass. That's the way.
How long did you think you were gonna stay?
We were signing contract for 3 years. If you work for 3 years and you get enough money, then you will be good. You can come home and go move with free transportation. But how can we save money that time? No more saving. How can we go?
Right.
Also nothing if I stay for a while.
You were in Honolulu first.
I stayed 6 days.
6 days.
Then assigned to Kauai, Kōloa. I no move nothing, no more place. Only Kōloa I work until I got my retirement.
First, when you came.
I got hoeing 3 days.
Ohana.
Kalai,
Oh, Kalai.
3 days.
3 days. And then.
Then I applied for a helper, tractor helper.
Oh.
And then after 1 year working helper, I got an accident over here.
Oh, what happened?
The plow. Well, it was a helper must sit down behind the tractor. So we were harrowing the not level ground, but only slip like that. So when the driver was turning, how fast he turned the helper, then the plow touched my that. So it was underneath. I got 7 stitches here.
Oh, wow.
Then I had an accident, and I applied for restore 1932. Then I was admitted. They take me in the store, and 32. I think July 26. Then after 1933, then the boss, the big luna from the plantation, told him, if you like order your family, you can now, because after 35, you can order your family free. So I asked the campo boss, Bisaya, in Kōloa, that's Gabino Kilantang. So let me apply to order my family. So they came. My wife free, the 2 children free, only half fare for my girl, who was 10 years old, half fare.
Are you glad that you came to Hawaii?
Yeah, I'm happy, because I managed to order my wife and join with me.
Yeah.
If they were there during the war, I don't know where are they now? Maybe they died. 1933, no more war yet. Huh? So I ordered them. That's lucky.
Oh, you want to take a break or go right to the next one?
Yes, please continue, the 3.
Okay, so our next interviewee is Dr. Marvin Brennecke, whose name is known by, by those who live there. Dr. Brennecke was born in Jackson, Missouri in 1906, where he grew up in a farming community near the Mississippi River Delta. He received his medical degree from Washington University in St. Louis in 1930. The following year, he left for Hawaii, first to work for the Lihue government as a government physician, and then 2 years later, he moved to Kōloa to replace Dr. Waterhouse as a physician for the Kōloa Plantation, and also for the McBride Plantation in LA and the Kauai terminals in Port Allen and Kauai Pineapple Company. He also served as a U.S. Public Health Service physician, as well as a government physician for the entire Kōloa district. 11 years later, he left for Waimea, and in 1964, helped to start the Waimea Dispensary and Clinic. Brennecke Beach in Poipu is where Dr. Brennecke's house once stood. He passed away in 1994.
Thinking of the islands occurred to me the first time when a Dr. A.B. Potter and his wife Oma came to Missouri U the second year of medicine. Dr. Potter gave lectures at medical school about medicine in Hawaii. And he and Oma took an interest in me, and we became quite friendly. And so one day while he was talking about the beauties of Hawaii, I facetiously said to him, well, if you ever hear of an opportunity for a young doctor in 2 or 3 years from now, or when I get through school, I'd like to try it myself. And then I interned at Missouri Baptist for a year, and 2 weeks before I finished my internship, he called on the phone And he said, do you want to go to Hawaii? And that was it. So that's how I came down here. So then within 3 weeks, I was on my way down here. I knew about Waikiki, and that's about it. I knew nothing about the economics, politics, or anything. Then after being here, there were so many things. The public health department of Hawaii has been so good, was so progressive all the way back from the early 1900s. The public health system of Hawaii was mainly supported by plantation doctors. Each plantation doctor was an agent of the health department of Hawaii. When I first came here, we had around 300 infant deaths out of 1,000 that occurred. So we all held baby clinics, maternal clinics. We'd go out into the plantation and hold them. Sometimes we'd have them in the hospital. So we were constantly teaching nutrition. We were constantly teaching to get their shots. And this thing just started dropping just like that. Hawaii is one of the first states that had smallpox vaccination and diphtheria too.
Who was responsible for this progressive public health policy?
It's a board of health that existed from about 1850. It was just like an umbrella over all the islands because the medical care was for free. So there was no obstruction to them coming because they didn't have to worry about whether they could afford it or not.
Did you recommend certain foods to certain families?
Yeah,
How
we
did
did.
you go about doing that?
We just told them what we considered an adequate maintenance diet. We taught them to eat vegetables and so on. Then, of course, we talked against white rice, because as I remember, eating a half a bag of rice a month, an adult individual was potentially very.
Half of 100-pound bag, you mean?
Yeah. People could go out and get all the food they wanted, but they just ate too much white rice and white bread, the Portuguese. See?
So maybe we can, at this point, ask Bobby Waterhouse-McCord, who knew Dr. Brennecke, to share her memories of Dr. Brennecke, please.
Well, Dr. Brennecke's house on the beach at Poipu, that was every summer we spent there swimming, all of our friends, cousins, and all the house guests that everybody had from various islands would come over, and we'd all swim at Poipu Beach, Brennecke's Beach, we called it. And we spent our time up there on his porch. We sat on his benches and we used his water, and we had our lunch up there, and we had so much fun. You know, in the 4 years of high school, going every summer, we never saw him. We never saw Dr. Brennecke. He could have chased us away a million times because we were brats up there. I'm sure we didn't leave any of our plates and garbage or anything. We were very good about that. But the fact that we just spent all our time up there after surfing. Oh, we loved Dr. Brennecke's house. Fond memories of growing up on Kauai. And also working in the canneries too. We had to work in the canneries, the pineapple canneries too. All my cousins and myself. That's what I remember about the fun times staying at my grandparents' in Kōloa, and then going down and sitting on Dr. Brennecke's porches and just having a wonderful time with all our friends.
Great memories. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Lurleen.
Okay, so we'll move on to the fifth interviewee, Robert Kunimura. He was born in Kōloa in 1915 to immigrant parents from Yamaguchi, Japan. He was the sixth of 7 children. He grew up in Kōloa's new mill camp and worked at the mill after graduating from high school in 1933. He quit 2 years later after a disagreement with the supervisor but returned to Kōloa in 1938 and became active in union organizing, signing up Kōloa workers for ILWU membership. He played a big role in the union's organization after World War II and its first territory-wide sugar strike in 1946. He became president of the Kauai local of the ILWU in 1947, where he remained until 1950, when it was consolidated into one territory-wide union. He returned to plantation work in 1952 and remained there until retiring in 1974.
The camp, see, like any other plantation, they segregated the workers by a race, okay? So where I was brought up was Japanese camp, okay? So practically all Japanese live in that camp, and they were meal workers because of the proximity from the camp to the mill. And the plantation had a strict control about that. Okay? If you were of other racial groups, if you wanted to move into the Japanese camp, you didn't, they wouldn't allow you to come in. Yeah. About 1930s, they started to, be more flexible about that. Yeah. By that time, our parents were a little more assimilated with the other racial group. Yeah. See, the prejudice wasn't that strong in the 30s already. Yeah. Japanese say akirame eru already, take it for granted already that there shouldn't be any discrimination. Yeah. Because after all, who created all this division is the plantation owners. They wanted the workers to always have some suspicion. And that's the way I could see, because there were a lot of unions that came up in the plantation, but strictly along racial lines. So when the Filipinos strike, the Japanese are working. And when the Japanese are striking, the Filipinos go off. Well, I mention it because they were the two predominant group numerically. Then you want the workers to band together. And every strike, union or strike along that line, racial line, got smashed until the advent of the ILWU, which organized the workers in one union, regardless of race, color, or national origin. Yeah. By that time, there was no language, too much of the language difficulty, because more or less everybody was speaking English. Yeah.
What's in store for the future of Kōloa? Say in 30, 40 years.
30, 40 years from now, my goodness, Warren, that's we're going into 2020, right?
Yeah.
I hate to project that. I hate, because see, when I was on the planning commission, these consultants, they crazy. 1990, we're going to have 80,000 population of Kauai, the projection, based on so many percentage.
Yeah.
And this is almost 1990, I didn't even see what they projected come true.
I want to add here that in 1919, the Kauai County population was just under 73,000. So they never did reach what they expected. And also, I couldn't find a date for when he passed away, but we might be, his family might be able to let us know.
So now wanted Mamo Kaneshiro to please share some mana'o. He knew Mr. Kunimura, and he himself grew up in Kōloa and worked on the plantation. Mamo, please.
Okay, you talk about the union. Just talk, yes. Kōloa was the first union in the whole town of, the island of Hawai. And I believe they formed a union because with all the hard work, working 10 to 12 hours a day, they were getting only about $1 a day for their for their work. So when the union came, well, I think, actually the plantation didn't want to, the workers of farmer union, because then they would, ask for higher pay, better housing, better paid hours. But, after after so many years, the union was formed in Kōloa, and it became very, very strong. And I believe that this union was, actually it was they call them the ILWU. And it was formed to help the people, to have a better life. So they get better pay, so they can educate their children, and they can see their children, grow up and go to school, go to college, and then come back and then help their children, to grow up and be a better person in the community. And I believe that Kōloa is one of the most multicultural community in the whole island of Hawaii, because we had workers come from all over the world. But I just thankful that Kōloa is left a very historical legacy to the people of, not only the people of Kōloa town, but throughout the island. And then all through these years, we have learned to work together, play together, suffer, and suffer. We say, well, we had a hard time, making a living, but we became a family, a community that supported each other in whatever we do. But I'm just thankful that Kōloa is a wonderful place. And then I was born here in Kōloa at the A.H. Waterhouse Hospital in the early 1926. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. That was beautiful. Great memories. And now I wanted to ask Ada Kuna, who's has interviewed more community members more recently, and is publishing a book called the Kōloa Plantation Days, which will be coming out at the end of this year. And to help Ada share more memories with us from the work that you've done and the interviews you've conducted, please.
This book started with a conversation in Phyllis Kunimura's living room, a simple project to share more about the Kōloa Plantation roots and part of the Kōloa Plantation Days Festival. Well, it started to grow. They interviewed 25 people, I think it was, and then they asked me if I would work on the project, and well, it just began to grow. Everybody had a friend who had a story to tell, and people like Mamo and Bobby and things. And in the end, we had over 70 people. And I'm sure that once the book is out, we're going to have more people coming forward. But I want to say that these people have all, so many of them have become friends of mine, and they are just wonderful, and they're very close-knit community, and I know they all love Kōloa.
I'm not muted. Are there any other, sorry, are there other stories that you can share with us? We were talking, you had so many stories when we were gathering together. Ada? Yeah, if you could unmute, please.
Okay, I have a cute story that comes to mind. It was one of Johnny Rivera, who sings over at Kukui'ula. He came from Puerto Rico, and he had a memory of his grandfather that used to work on the plantation. And they had what they called a bongo, and it was a number, and people were known by their numbers, not by their names. And he would go to the store and he would charge on that bongo. And at the end of the month, he would go in to settle the account. Well, sometimes he didn't have enough money. All that work that month, and there wasn't enough money, and it would be carried over. But he said sometimes he maybe had 10 cents left over. And the grandfather would come home. He would go to the closet, get out his jacket and his hat, dust them off, and he'd go to the movie. That was his reward for a month's work.
Thank you. And so now I wanted to call in Councilman Errol Kaneshiro, who is one of the coordinators of the Kōloa Plantation Days celebration that is annually celebrated, to give us some background about the Kōloa Plantation Days and why it got organized and what it involves. If you're still there, and I know you also have some childcare that you're doing, so if you're still with us, otherwise we'll ask Melissa.
I'm here. Grandpa came in, tagged in. So yeah, first off, I just want to say thank you, for putting this event on. David Thorpe, thank you for all your hard work. You've always been super supportive of Kōloa Plantation Days, and it's such an awesome event to hear all these stories. Actually, we've had grand marshals. You have Iki Moir, who's a Kanutsen. We had Betsy Toulon as one of our grand marshals one year. We heard from Vicente, and we actually had Sakaras. Some of the last few, I think there was only 2 left in Kōloa that were still alive at the time. Melchors, we had them as our grand marshals in our parade. And, again, hearing from Uncle Mamo, who obviously has a lot of fanfare. I saw a bunch of notes coming in telling him thank you for his stories. But we also had Uncle Mamo and Auntie Val as our grand marshals. And then we did have Grow Farm plantation workers also that worked at the plantation one year. So, it's always great to be celebrating our history and to know where we're from. Kōloa Plantation Days, our main goal is to keep the information alive, the history of Kōloa alive. I think Melissa probably has more facts as far as when it started. I know it started with Auntie Phyllis and Uncle Tony Kunimura, and we're going on to almost in our 30s already. But it's unfortunate with COVID. It was the first time we had to take a break and not do our parade and our park event. And again, this year last year we had our virtual. This year we didn't have anything, but fortunately we have a good team. We have Bertram, who's on here, who's our VP. We have Melissa, who's our parade coordinator, and of course we have our MVP Ada, who's been working really hard on our Kōloa Plantation Day book, which we're hoping to finish this year. It's an unreal book that's been getting put together for many years now. It has interviews with a lot of people that have passed away already. It's very similar to watching these videos. We have interviews with Auntie Stella, Auntie Phyllis Kunimura, Auntie Val, who just passed away. So we see it as an opportunity to really keep the history, keep the memories of all of these people that made up Kōloa alive. And Melissa, you can add anything else that you want to add.
Thank you. Yes,
Sure.
Melissa.
Yeah, I just wanted to add how this all got started. So Phyllis Kunimura, in 1985, something that struck me was these oral histories were done in 1987, most of them. And that was 2 years after the first Kōloa Plantation Days Festival. So as sugar was winding down, it was still happening on the island. And in 1985, the Hawaiʻi Sugar Planters Association got together all the different plantations on the island and said, we wanted to celebrate the sesquicentennial of sugar. So they did two things. One was to establish a monument, which you can see. It doesn't look like much from the outside because it looks like two halves of the grinder, and you have to go inside to see the different ethnicities. And actually, Ted Blake was on that original committee. He passed away this week, and so just a big, our hearts go out, to his family this week. But this is part of the reason, we share these stories, because folks who lived through it, who have these memories to tell, aren't going to be here all the time. And, the first person who really got us going on the memories was Auntie Stella Burgess. And besides that, Auntie Stella Burgess is credited with roping in Errol Kaneshiro to the parade. And Phyllis Kunimura was also Bertram Almeida's teacher as well. And a lot of this was about sharing the memories, not because the world wasn't changing, but because it was. And in order that our children and our grandchildren would know what that life was like, what brought everyone together, and to share. And one of the questions we asked people for the book on this project that Ada and I have been working on for the last 4 years is, what did they want to share that they wanted to make sure was passed on? Because, and I wanted to see if Bertram had anything to add there, because Bertram's always so eloquent about, looking at our history and then looking at our future.
Yes, thank you.
Uh-oh, we have some people on mute.
Am I on? Okay. Sorry, first time doing this. Hi, Bertram Almeida. It's such an honor to be sitting here and seeing all these faces and people and the stories of people that were just featured. Mamo, Mr. Kaneshiro, he's my football and baseball coach. I grew up with his family. And you talked about Mrs. Kunimura, my school teacher right here at Kōloa School, and remember sitting over there in the library that we're sitting in right now and listening to her as she would read books to us, and and listening to the stories about all the different cultures and everything and how it became. I myself, I'm Portuguese and Japanese and I think a few other things, but it's you tend to watch all this that you're seeing now, and then you look and you kind of do some reflection, and I feel so blessed being born and raised here in such a beautiful place in Kōloa, in paradise. Sometimes you kind of take it for granted and stuff, you don't really think about it, but then when you reflect and you hear stories like this, it's so powerful. It makes me proud and of who I am, and part of the how I came to be, and being asked by Mrs. Kunimura to join the team for the Kōloa Plantation Days, and to be on the committee with Errol and everyone else, Melissa and Ida and everybody else. It's such an honor, it's such a privilege, and I just hope that there's others in the community that will see this, and hopefully they'll join in and keep the plantation days and things like this alive. So yeah, it's such a beautiful thing, and I'm glad I'm here. This is my first Zoom meeting. I was like, I'm sitting over here watching everything. I was like, what's going on? But yeah, it's exciting, and it's just all this emotions that's filling me up right now. You know, the pride and everything, and you know, nostalgia and all that stuff. You know, I feel like if I could sum it all up, you know, I was very fortunate. My family, my dad worked for the phone company, and my mom worked several different jobs, but she ended up working for my uncle at Pacific Services and Development. And I think that company at one time was doing the tires for the big trucks. They would recap the tires. So I think that's the closest that our family got to the plantation. But, you know, being born and raised here, and when going to school over here, a lot of my friends I grew up with, you know, that their families worked in the plantation. You know, I had a lot of Filipino friends, dear friends, you know, lifelong friends, and Japanese, and all the different cultures. And you know, and you know, you look back and you listen to all this, and it's just like, wow, you know, it's just such a blessing. And I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who put this together, and hopefully I can still be part of the Kōloa Plantation team. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, because we've had to, your team has had to postpone the Plantation Days Festival this year because of the pandemic, and look forward to the 2022 celebration. So we're lucky that we can at least gather in this way and learn about your community and share the proud legacy that you have, and especially that legacy of diversity, which I think Uncle Mamo Kaneshiro stressed. We also have Lenora Kaio Kamalie, who's born and raised here in Kōloa. So I wanted her to share what she has observed in her lifetime so far. And also she is, as I said, she's a planner and analyst with the Hawaii County Planning Commission, and to also share what the county has planned. Uncle Mamo referred to that earlier plan. No, it was Mr. Kunimura in his memoir talked about the Planning Commission and their projections. And so maybe you can help share with us some of that, and then we can all talk and respond to what we're looking at and comment about what we see as future here in Kōloa.
I think we're just about at 80,000 now at 2021, actually, for the island. But first of all, I just wanted to thank you, Daviana, for inviting me here today. I don't feel, you know, I feel very privileged. I'm one of 11 children that grew up, and I'm one of the younger ones in the family. And there's so many other people that come to mind that, to me, you know, I would love to see sitting here and talking besides myself. And so when you asked me to talk, I was like, really, you know, because I was born in the 70s and everything, you know, do I really, you know, do I really rate to be talking about stuff? And I guess it was a while ago. But I just wanted to say that, you know, as for myself as a planner, a lot of my early, you know, a lot of my trajectory to being a planner, I can say, comes from growing up in Kōloa. Myself and my friends Esther Yoshimori, Cynthia Hulama, Kalani Potts, we actually used to hang out at Kōloa Neighborhood Center a lot, roller skating and riding our bicycles. And that's where the Kōloa Neighborhood Association had their meetings. And I actually started getting involved because Uncle Teddy Blake was there. I started getting involved in Malama Mahao Lipu that way. And those were probably the first days of me starting to become a community activist, and then eventually going into planning school. But I wanted to just share that, you know, one of my fondest memories of Kōloa is actually the cane roads, the dirt roads, and all the goat trails around the community. And they were our, you know, to me, it was freedom. And if you had a bicycle or if your legs worked, you were such a lucky person. Everyone knew you. We always felt safe. We knew what time we were supposed to go home, and everybody knew what time we were supposed to go home too. So if you were out and about with your bicycles, they would definitely start pointing the way home, you know, because it was getting very late. So just having a bicycle, being able to visit, for example, the camp over by Kōloa Mill, and seeing whether or not we could sneak over to Poipu through Hapa Trail was always, something that we tried to do, making sure that we got home and got dried maybe before anybody caught that we went so far out of the way. But moving forward, just wanted to mention a lot of the folks here and a lot of folks in the community were involved in the 2015 South Kauai Community Plan. And that is online right now, actually. And I just wanted to, I actually brought it up on my phone. The vision for Kōloa up until 2037 is that it will continue to be a thriving and residential community that maintains the rural and historic old town charm by preserving and enhancing and protecting the vast cultural treasures. And one of the most beautiful things about Kōloa is because it's so diverse culturally, and there's just many memories of my friends just being of probably every cultural background, and being able to gather at the park, the school, the community center, Ice House, Yamamoto store. I mean, these are things that will stay with me, that I continue to share with my son as he grows up, so that he can feel proud of the town that he's growing up in right now too, because we live in Hawaii. So thank you. Oh, Davi, your mic.
Sorry. Keep doing that. Thank you so much. I wanted to also ask everybody who's Zooming in, if you have any questions that you'd like to pose to our panelists, I invite you to do so. Or if you want to share a memory, let us know in the chat, and we can call upon you also at the same time. We do have one question I wanted to put out, and I don't know if anybody here can answer. It's from Rochelle Tavares, and it says, "My heart is full hearing about Kōloa. I feel connected to this place. Can anyone tell me about my family, the Peiler?" It's P-E-I-L-E-R, Peiler maybe, family. "My grandfather was Leroy Peiler. His sister was Dora Peiler, a Hana, an educator. Another sister married into the Suchia family. Another sister drowned in a stream in the old Kōloa town." I don't know if anyone can assist Rochelle in that inquiry. Ada?
No, I don't know them, but I would like to have Bobby tell us a little bit about her great-great-grandfather. I think the story is so important to us here in Kōloa.
Well, first of all, Mr. Tsuchiya was schoolmaster at Mānoa School. We had a teacher and a principal, and Mr. Tsuchiya was our principal. Then he moved to Waimea High School and was our principal. Oh my gosh, do we remember all the Tsuchiyas and their families, because we grew up with them. That's the Mana Kekaha side.
Yeah. And about your father or grandfather, I think it is, Ada asked you, I think about the work he did on smallpox, was it, Ada? How he inoculated all the people on the island.
Well, right now I'm reading the books Ko'omalu. There are 2 volumes, and that's really the start of the people coming, the white folks coming to Kauai to preach from back east, 1920. And those books tell you all about the starting of the plantations, the starting of churches, how the Hawaiians got together and built the churches. They weren't paid for it. They did it all on their own. Yeah, and then they hired the carpenter and the big guy to come over and really put it together. But it's a beautiful story if anybody wants to read the Ko'omalus.
Oh, thank you. Ada, did you want to share maybe what you had in mind?
Yeah, Bobby. Yeah, Bobby. Tell us about your great grandfather. How your great Dr. James Smith.
Oh, well, yeah, that's all in the books. You'll read all about how he the Kovics. I mean, he was giving shots to everybody at Kauai. Then he went to Ni'ihau to give the shots. And one of the stories was of course, we've heard all these stories all our lives. That's all we talked about was Kauai. Was that the boat to Ni'ihau turned over. So I'm not sure the Ni'ihauans got all their shots in those days. This is in the 1830s, 1820s actually, 1820s and 30s. He came over in 1842 and had 9 children. And one of them became a doctor. One of his sons became a doctor. And that doctor was shot by one of the Hawaiians because they said, if we kill the doctor, our families will not have to go to Molokai. And in those days, he had to send, he was only 40 years old. And his wife was his wife-to-be was on his way from Honolulu to Kauai, and they were to be married the next weekend. But the Hawaiians caught him on his porch in the 2-story colonial house right next to the missionary church. That was their original homes where they taught Hawaiian girls, the families that came here. They had schools for Hawaiian girls, and they taught them. And they taught them all, everything, how to be young ladies, how to, anyway, long stories. And there's so much to tell. But anyway, and then the next generation was my grandfather. So there were 3 generations of doctors on Kauai. And then one of my 5 sisters married a doctor, and he was a doctor in Honolulu at the big pink building that you can see on the hill, military hospital. I can't remember the name of it now, but Tripler, yeah. He was a doctor there. So there were 4 generations.
4 generations.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of service.
Okay. Thanks, Bobby. That was the story I wanted you to tell.
I would like Uncle Mamo to share more. Ada, could you suggest a story that Uncle might be able to share with us?
Tell him to share about he had
can you talk about that you were the coach? That you were the coach for the 30 years for the Little League? Yeah, tell that story.
Oh, actually I work with children when I was 30 years old, and right up to the year 2000, I worked with the Little League, baseball team, and the football team from Kōloa. Yes, and it was my privilege to work with children because I guess growing up we didn't have all the the ability to enjoy life like when I started to coach the young people in our community. But I thank God that He has helped me to work hard in our business, and yet I have time to work with the children and the teenagers and the adults in the churches and throughout the island. And I thank the Lord for being, for helping me born in Kōloa. This is one of the, I think, one of the best communities in the whole world. Yes.
Uncle, earlier you were telling us that you had a wagon that you sold candies to, and you went from Kōloa to Hanamaulu. Could you tell us about that again, please?
What's that?
Your wagon that you took to Hanamaulu and sold candy.
What's that?
That you sold candy.
You had a wagon that you sold candy, Uncle?
I didn't get your question.
Oh, yes. Did you understand? I think you said you had a wagon that you sold candies and you went from Kōloa to Hanamaulu? And vegetables. You sold vegetables. Did you sell your vegetables from your farm?
Yeah, I sold, I had a vegetable wagon that I went all the way from Kekaha, well, actually from Hanamaulu all the way to Kekaha. So many, so many people, know, well, even after 30, 40 years, they recognize me, say, hey, Mr. Kirisho, you remember me? I say, oh, yes. Well, and then I always ask them, what is their last name? And I see people in Honolulu, they say, oh, Mr. Kanishiro, you coached me when I was in the, but I thank the Lord for, well, giving me long life, that I may continue the work that my work is not finished yet. I'm still.
And Errol, would you like to share some stories too about your grandpa?
Yeah.
Well, I'll share some stories about Uncle Mamo. I remember playing Little League, and I used to play catcher, and he used to and he would always push my butt forward and tell me, hey, go more forward, hug the plate. And I was always scared to do it because I thought the batter was going to hit my glove, but he kept pushing me forward all the time. But yeah, Uncle Mamo's been a pillar of the community. Kōloa Pop Warner, he was there forever. As far as my memories of Kōloa, I don't think they do it anymore, but when I used to play T-ball, they used to have these big parades with each T-ball team. And all of the parents would make this big banner with the logo of whatever your name was, and they'd put all the kids' names on it. And then the kids would walk from First Hawaiian Bank all the way to the Kōloa baseball field on the first day of baseball. It was pretty interesting. I mean, our family has a long history in Kōloa. Both Uncle Mamo, my grandpa Sugar, they grew up in Banana Camp, which was just behind the baseball field. I believe it's owned by the Wickmans. And, they have a ton of stories about being in Kōloa, growing up in Kōloa. And, I also wanted to tell Auntie Delia, I still remember Uncle Louie. He loved to sing and he loved to cook. I always remember him always bringing food by my dad's house or going behind Suyokas with all the Suyoka gang. And, he would always love to sing. He always had to sing. I think it was Danny Boy was one of his most favorite songs that he would sing. So, it's just neat to see how tight-knit the community was and how really closely connected everyone was. My involvement with Kōloa Plantation Days came from Auntie Stella and Auntie Phyllis. Auntie Phyllis was my kindergarten teacher, and Auntie Stella was actually my bus driver when I was going to Kōloa Elementary School. And so we had like the most quiet bus probably in the state, because you know who Auntie Stella was, and she would raise her voice and all the kids would be quiet. But it's just just listening to these stories bring back a whole ton of memories. And I think we all know that the community we grew up in kind of shaped who you are, and you're just very, very appreciative and very happy to hear the stories and know the people that have grown up in your community.
Right. Yeah.
Can I add that Mamo used to play barefoot football. For 2 years, they played on the Plutes, he and 4 of his brothers, and they played barefoot football. And that lasted for years and years, but he only played for 2 years. Then he had to start working on the pig farm. And one day, Mamo asked me, would you like to see the house where I was born? And I said, oh, yeah, we would like that. Well, we went, and you should have seen the house. It was just all falling in, all the walls and everything. And it was such a, it Yeah, he remembers, and he said it's still there. It's still standing. So, and he showed me where he was born in the kitchen. All 11 kids were born in that kitchen. That's
Wow.
falling in now.
So, Kendall Watts wrote and shared that Dr. James Smith, which is Bobby Waterhouse McCord's great-great-grandfather, vaccinated the entire island of Kauai and Niihau against smallpox in 1853. While there were almost 6,000 deaths on Oahu, Kauai was largely spared the ravages of the epidemic because of the vaccination program that Dr. Smith carried out.
Yeah. And remember, he went by horseback all the way up to Hawaiʻi and then all the way to Mānoa. He went by horseback, and that meant he had to cross 40 rivers and streams to get there. Yeah. Amazing man, amazing great-great-granddaughter.
I had something.
Yes, Melissa.
Yeah, I had something I wanted to share because what you have here, very special people connecting together. And I wanted to share something about David Thorpe. So one day, Ada called me because all of the interviews had been done and we were looking for photographs, and we wanted to see some older photographs of the ethnicities, the different places that people came from. And Ada said, Melissa, you've got to come down here to Kōloa Library and see what David found. And underneath a cabinet, he pulled out 3 binders filled with photographs from the early 1900s that were compiled when the little book, it said it was the 50th anniversary of Kōloa School. They did a small book, and that was the initial inspiration for this book, but it's grown much larger. And he said, wow, look at these photos. And then we were trying to figure out where they were from. And Mabel Hashisaka, they had collected these photos and she had displayed them in the store, but she thought that all these photos were gone during Iniki. So just the process of asking people to recall the memories or look for the photographs uncovered these photos. And so when we went and we were meeting with Anne Hashisaka to ask permission, can we use these photos in the book? She said, oh my God, Melissa, we thought that these were gone and that no one had them. And just by doing the process is really just, it's like a treasure hunt under every stone. And so this is such a joyful opportunity to be able to share, because the last 2 years, basically at one point during the pandemic, I was the only person who went to Ada's house to bring her food. And I would get stopped and show, hey, I'm bringing food to my kupuna. But it's such a pleasure to be able to share these memories. And I hope that there will be a chance someday soon when we'll be able to continue this. And I really want to thank Daviana and Micah and Lurleen and all of you guys bringing this together to give us this opportunity to share. And I hope there'll be more to share.
Thank you so much. And we look forward. It's 300 pages, 200 to 300 photographs, and will be coming out in December. So or the end of the year. So we're hopefully in time for Christmas. And we could have another Zoom for the book launch or something in person. But I wanted to ask Leah again about, what is the Kauai planning and, what's in store for Kōloa? Looking at the changes, it seems you have like this core in the town that has an architecture that is reminiscent of the plantation days, but then surrounding the area, there's a lot of new developments coming up. And I know that I think in one of the areas where the golf course was going, they still had to protect the Hawaiian sites. What have been some of the unique approaches and protections that have been outlined as development occurs here to protect the plantation feeling and also the Hawaiian sites?
I'll also defer to Councilmember Kaneshiro if he wants to put in some thoughts of his own. as I mentioned, the South Kauai Community Plan, your community plan really is a very powerful tool when there are projects that are coming or being proposed for the town, to really look at it and use it to remember and to ensure that a really big part of the vision and the policies is to preserve the historic and rural character of the town. There in the plan itself, you'll see a lot of the different heritage sites also identified. And for ourselves, or the work that I do hold information about especially the registered sites all over the island, but for Kauai too. So housing has always been a priority for the community, not just in Kōloa, but in other places. And the economy on this side, obviously, we have a lot of the resorts in Poipu area, but also a lot of commercial activity too, and a lot of new things that are coming up. So, again, the priority has definitely turned toward housing, which is something our community has wanted to see. But for myself, as a Kōloa resident, again, just reminding our community that the community plan does specify that keeping that rural and historic character is very important, not just our cultural sites, which is extremely important, but the historic properties around the town and kind of adjacent to the town. The architecture of Kōloa town itself is actually, there is an overlay, a zoning overlay to protect the areas that are especially historic. And again, just wanting to encourage our community, or letting our community know that there are policies in place to ensure these things. And the more of us that understand and get involved in the process, the better we can actuate or ensure that our shared vision to preserve our rural plantation town can continue forward. So
that's amazing. And Councilman Kaneshiro, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I'll just say it's good that we have a tight-knit community, so everyone was involved in the planning, and I think everybody understood that, Kōloa is going to grow, and the main focus on the plan was, we know it's going to grow, but how do we want it to grow? Where do we want it to grow? And where do we not want to see growth? And I think that was the big thing about the plan, is that it really did take into consideration a lot of the community's opinions on it. And I think a big thing coming up actually is that I know the community worked hard on a transportation plan for Kōloa, and I know the county is pursuing a federal grant to try and implement that transportation plan that was put together by the community. And it was a unreal plan that thought about the future. And I believe majority of the Kōloa community got on board with that transportation plan. Obviously, it costs a lot of money to do, and I'm just glad that the county is moving forward and trying to get this grant to actually move that project forward. I can't remember what the grant is called now. In the past, the grant was called Tiger Grant. Oh, the RAISE grant.
The RAISE grant, and we're asking for $25 million for the plan that we put together for Kōloa to improve the circulation.
Beautiful, thank you, Delia Akaji. I wanted to ask you to share something. You were so eloquent in your first going, and I somehow thought I might have cut you short. But if there's anything else you'd like to share about, Kauai Historical Society works very diligently and also helping to build awareness of these historic sites and their importance, and what role you might have played here in Kōloa as well, or any other thoughts you'd like to share, please.
Well, like how everyone else shared about how much Kōloa means to them and how special it is. It really is a special place. And growing up in Kōloa, I was born in 1953. So at the time, my dad worked at the plantation and various different jobs. And when he finally retired, he was the irrigation supervisor for Waita and Mahalapu area, and that was his life. I mean, he gave everything to the plantation, and he enjoyed it. And I have such fond memories of growing up in the plantation camp. We lived between Kōloa town and Knutson Park. It was a small camp, and I don't even know. Errol might know what the camp number was, but I don't think it ever had a name, not that I can recall. But growing up was very special. It was carefree, and although people may say that the plantation was how much they controlled the workers. For me, it was a carefree, because you knew that they would take care of everything you needed. You had your plantation store, you had your dispensary, you had everything you needed. The medical was free. I was never a person who had good health from when I was young. And everything was free. I just, for myself personally, and I know other people have different memories or different feelings about the plantation, but for myself, it provided us a wonderful life that we had. My dad, I know he enjoyed working with all his co-workers. Keith Smith was a real close friend of his. A lot of these other people, and my dad was just a really personable guy, and of course he had his moments. But like, I don't know if Errol remembers, but in one of the Kōloa Plantation Days parade, he wasn't invited to participate. So what he did was he got his old truck and he put up his Portuguese flag, and he went to the end of the parade and just drove like he was in the parade, but that's my dad. I mean, he did things like that, and people, I hope that people understood him, and he loved to sing. He would go into Suioka store, and everywhere he went, he would be singing, because he did sing with the Merry Melodiers, and he did have a nice voice. But I remember one of the girls at Suioka store, after he passed, she told me that she was there early one morning and the store wasn't open. Nobody was there, just herself. But she could hear my dad singing, and that really touched me, because that was his, beside the plantation, that was his joy in life, singing. So I have a lot of really fond memories, but those are kind of the ones that stick out in my mind.
Thank you so much. I want to thank everyone who came in special to the Kōloa Library, and Errol also for joining us via Zoom to share your special memories, and really giving us all who are in the Zoom a sense of the community, the strong sense of community that you have, and really appreciation for the various cultures. It's really heartwarming to witness and to feel that kind of heartwarm joy that you have being together and sharing these memories and being proud about that plantation heritage. And I want to thank Hawaii Community Council for the Humanities for helping us sponsor this with our Center for Oral History. But David Thorpe, you were just so wonderful, and also gracious in hosting us here at the library. And Ada and Melissa, you were just so important to help us invite everyone and to make this program so rich and enriching for all of us. And I want to thank all of you for sharing this evening with us. Aiko, did you want to say something? I see you. No, okay. Well, thank you so much. I wanted to say I went to the Suioka store before I came here, and I was so impressed at the diversity of foods, and I could tell that they're really catering to the community, and the community must be very diverse, because they had Hawaiian food and Filipino food and Japanese food. And I was like, wow, this is a very and yeah, I've been looking for dragon fruit, and I got some dragon fruit there. So I was just impressed. Thank you for all the work you have all done to protect your way of life and the historic richness of Kōloa town. Mahalo nui loa, aloha. And I want to thank Micah, who's helping us, Micah Mizukami from LA, who's put this all together, keep this going. And thanks, Kendall Watts, for all that you shared. And the book was 100 years of, okay, I said 100 Years of Healing as a good book to reference about the public health here on Kauai.